In trying to convince you that Mr. Depp has carried his burden of proof in proving that he was never abusive to Amber on even one occasion.
Legal argument.
Think about the message that Mr. Depp and his attorneys are sending to Amber, and by extension to every victim of domestic abuse everywhere. If you didn't take pictures, it didn't happen. If you did take pictures, they're fake. If you didn't tell your friends, you're lying.
She did.
And if you did tell your friends, they're part of the hoax. If you didn't seek medical treatment, you weren't injured. If you did seek medical treatment, you're crazy. If you do everything that you can to help your spouse, the person that you love, rid himself of the crushing drug and alcohol abuse that spins him into an abusive, rage-filled monster, you're a nag. And if you finally decide that enough is enough, you've had enough of the fear, enough of the pain,
get the bottle out,
you have to leave
cut
to save yourself, you're a gold digger. That is the message that Mr. Depp is asking you to send. But he doesn't stop there, because in Mr. Depp's world, you don't leave Mr. Depp. And if you do, he will start a campaign of global humiliation against you, a smear campaign that lasts to this very day.
Like all of his other previous
everything he can to destroy your life, to destroy your career.
Like all of the other ones.
That is what they're saying, ladies and gentlemen. And that's what they're trying to get you, the jury, to be an accomplice to.
They want you to want
proof. But it's not
proof.
surprising, because Mr. Depp cannot and will not take responsibility for his own actions. It's always someone else's fault. Just as Ms. Vasquez did, and Mr. Chu did, I would like to extend my thanks to you on behalf of Amber and our whole legal team for the care and the diligence with which you have served as jurors in this matter. You've paid attention to every witness, every piece of evidence.
Let's hope that didn't
happen. I can't even imagine the sacrifice that you've made in terms of time away from your friends, your family, your job, to be here on this jury. It's a very important role that you're serving.
Let's hope that didn't happen for their sake. Oh, man.
Let's pick up where we started 6 weeks ago in opening statement. You may remember that I asked you to keep a simple question in mind, which is, why are you here? And much of what you've heard during the course of this trial, you don't need to make a decision on in order to return a verdict for Ms. Heard on Mr. Depp's claim of defamation. Now, we'll talk about Ms. Heard's claim of defamation against Mr. Depp, and Elaine will address most of that in a few minutes. But your key question to answer is, does the First Amendment give Ms. Heard the right to write the words that she wrote in this article on December 18th, 2018? That's the question. And you cannot simultaneously protect and uphold the First Amendment and find in favor of Johnny Depp on his claim. You simply cannot.
Wow.
You have to decide, should someone be able to write an article like that in the United States of America
Surprised you went for that.
without being sued successfully, without having to go through the hell that Ms. Heard has gone through? So let's talk about that. And to do that, we get to explain a bit more about the law that you
That's crazy that he's going for this. Oh, my God.
This is the op-ed piece. I'm not going to read it to you again. You heard me read it to you in opening statements. And I would urge you, when you're in the deliberation room, read it. Read it again. And I know we focused on it, here and there over the course of the trial, but the vast majority of this trial has not focused on these words, on this piece. This is obviously the paper edition. There's the online edition as well. Now we get a chance to discuss with you exactly what you have to find about this article.
But they talked specifically about the online edition. That was the explicit thing. It's like they're arguing against something that wasn't an argument.
This is one of the jury instructions that you'll get. And I've been so looking forward to being able to actually explain to you, as the judge read all the instructions to you this morning, and I know it was a lot, but we've been looking forward to being able to explain to you what you're here to decide. Because I imagine for some of the case, it's been kind of unclear. What are you being asked to decide? These are the things that you have to find, and you have to answer yes. As Mr. Chu said, you have to answer yes to all of them in order to find in favor of Mr. Depp.
Easy.
So you have to find that the statement was about Mr. Depp. And you can decide that in the context of the article. And I'll get to the arguments that Mr. Depp raises on that in a minute. You also have to find that the statement is false. And we're going to look at the statements here. We're going to look at each of the three statements. And in order to win his claim, Mr. Depp has to prove every single element. And there's a concept in the jury instructions that you really didn't hear from Mr. Depp's side this morning, but you've all heard it, I'm sure, outside the courtroom, which is burden of proof. It is Mr. Depp's burden to prove each and every one of these elements. If he cannot, Ms. Heard wins. If he cannot prove each and every one of these elements under the burden of proof that's applicable, Ms. Heard wins. And there's two different burdens of proof that we'll get to. For all of them,
playing on that technicality.
Number 7, the burden of proof is greater weight of the evidence. So you weigh the evidence and you decide, has Mr. Depp proven to you the first 6 elements? The 7th one, for actual malice, the clear and convincing evidence standard, we'll get to in a few minutes. But this is what he has to prove. And he cannot do that. These are the 3 statements. And I know you may be thinking to yourself, wait a second, don't we have to decide if Mr. Depp committed abuse? And the answer is no, you don't have to. Because these 3 statements, you can decide as a matter of law, or as a matter of fact, as you weigh the evidence and the fact that they're true. So the first 2 statements I'm going to address together. Then, 2 years ago, I became a public figure representing domestic abuse, and I felt the full force of our culture's wrath for women who speak out.
Well, what happened 2 years ago, man?
Number 2, I had the rare vantage point of seeing in real time how institutions protect men accused of abuse. When you go back to the jury room to deliberate, you should feel free, like I said, to read the article. And think of the article's purpose. The jury instructions also tell you to take these statements in the context of the article. Think about the purpose. The purpose of the article was to promote legislative measures designed to protect victims of domestic abuse. Designed to protect people who did exactly what Ms. Heard did, to speak out. That's apparent on the face of the article. And to do that, Ms. Heard talked about her own life experiences as someone who had obtained a TRO against Mr. Depp, someone who had accused Mr. Depp of domestic violence. Make no mistake, and Mr. Depp's side keeps trying to say that we're somehow suggesting that 2 years before she wrote this, that Ms. Heard hadn't had anything to do with Mr. Depp. We're not saying that. You heard Ms. Heard herself say, of course, 2 years before I wrote this article, I felt the full force of our culture's wrath
then there
for
it
women who
is.
speak out after she obtained a temporary restraining order against Mr. Depp.
How is a lie a foundation for another lie?
Representing domestic abuse. But the words that she wrote here, and then chronicling her own experience after that, those words are true. Those words are true.
What?
Similarly, the rare vantage point of seeing, based on her own experiences post May 27th, 2016, how institutions protect men accused of abuse, those words are true, and the First Amendment
he lost his job.
Ms. Heard's right to say them. Now, the third statement is absolutely true as well, but we're going to take that separately because she didn't write it.
Oh my God, man.
Under the First Amendment, the statements have to be false in order for Mr. Depp to win. Now, plaintiff addresses, like I said, an argument that we're not making. And as I said, we're not running from the fact that when she discussed becoming a public figure representing domestic abuse, Amber was speaking of her experiences reporting domestic abuse against Johnny Depp.
Yes. Okay.
She admitted to that, but that doesn't make the article or the statements about Johnny Depp. Think about it. Think about every piece of evidence that you've heard over the last 6 weeks about his abuse, about their relationship.
But it's all about him.
None of that is in the article. None of it. We all know that it would be a very different article if she had written about what she suffered, that she's told you about over the last 6 weeks. Because he knows the words are true, Mr. Depp says that the words now have a defamatory implication. He says the statements are the same as saying, Johnny Depp abused me. But just because he wants to make the article about himself doesn't mean it is. He has to show you that any defamatory implication was designed and intended. Look at number 4. Designed and intended by Ms. Heard to convey the defamatory meaning that he suggests. Just
Yes.
because people might read the article and remember, oh yeah, Amber Heard used to be married to Johnny Depp,
Yes.
and she accused him of abuse, that doesn't mean that she designed and intended defamatory implications in writing about herself.
Then
And
why did everybody
about it.
think
If
that?
Mr. Depp is right,
She
in
didn't correct
virtually
it.
any statement that anyone could ever make about their own life that implies anything, implies any involvement with any other person, could be defamatory. And that's clearly not what the First Amendment intends.
First Amendment.
She didn't design and intend the words to be the equivalent of writing Johnny Depp abused me. And you don't have to take her words for it. You can take the words of Terrence Doherty of the ACLU. He said that the op-ed wasn't even Ms. Heard's idea. The ACLU wrote the first draft, and great care was taken in drafting the article so as not to make it about Mr. Depp or Ms. Heard's relationship with him.
So it was
That's
contextualized
the only
around
evidence
that.
presented about Ms.
To
Heard's
avoid
motive,
liability.
except her statements that that was exactly what she wanted to do. She wanted to talk about her experiences after Johnny Depp. She wanted to own her story after Johnny Depp and fit those into what other women experience, what other people experience having accused someone of domestic abuse and the backlash that they suffer.
Other
And then
people.
talk about legislative measures that could help protect people in those positions. That's what she meant, and that's what the article is about. There's no hidden meaning here, ladies and gentlemen. This
You're
isn't
right.
a hit piece on Johnny Depp.
It wasn't hidden.
This isn't a hit piece on Johnny Depp. And you can end here. You can end there by saying the statements that she wrote were not false and the First Amendment protects them. Let's talk about the headline for a minute.
Okay.
The headline that was published in the online version only of the article
Yes.
on December 18th, 2018
Correct.
said, I spoke up against sexual violence and faced our culture's wrath. A few points here. Number one, and this evidence is undisputed. There's no dispute about this. So as you weigh the evidence, you don't have to check your common sense at the door, and you can weigh circumstantial evidence, you can weigh facts, but you can't see evidence where no evidence exists. And the undisputed evidence here is that Ms. Heard didn't write the headline, she didn't approve the headline, she had nothing to do with it, she was not given notice of the headline. She testified, you saw her testify about the sexual assault that she experienced at the hands of Mr. Depp. You saw her testify about that.
Well, you heard her testify.
They're calling her a liar. You saw her on the stand testify with your own mouth, with her own mouth, exactly what she went through for the first time in court, because people
Yeah, and she
who
lied.
suffered that, they don't want to broadcast that to the world. They want to penalize Ms. Heard for not speaking about that earlier. That's ridiculous, and it's insulting, and it's just victim blaming at its most disgusting.
Uh-huh.
The only reference to
Sure.
sexual assault in the article,
Moralize
and you
to
can
them
read
more.
the op-ed, is sexual assault that she said
Calls
she
the
experienced
jury
by the time she
disgusting.
was of college age, before Mr. Depp. So there is a reference to sexual violence in that article, but it's not by Mr. Depp.
Victim blaming. Oh my
Mr.
God.
Depp can't hold her liable for a headline she didn't write, that contained something that had nothing, that was not about him. And they want you to think that she republished the headline by tweeting out the link to the online version. So let's look at this.
What he did.
This is the tweet that she sent on December 19th.
Uh-huh.
The hyperlink says, opinion Amber Heard, I spoke up against sexual violence. That's the online version of the article.
Yes.
Ms. Heard said you can't attach, you can't tweet a piece of paper.
That's true.
So when she wanted to share that she had written this article, what choice does she have? She has to attach that link.
So she had to
And the
do
jury
it.
instructions that you have make clear that a hyperlink is not republication. Forwarding a link on does not mean that you broadcast the statement again, but that's what they want to make you think.
But she added text, which is
The
what the
only
judge
way-
said.
And the jury instructions that you have, and we
Here
don't
it
need
is.
to read through them in detail now.
We're gonna go into
but
a
the
technicality.
republication instruction says that merely linking to an article does not amount to republication.
That's not what she did.
But adding content to a linked article may constitute republication.
She
You
did.
must determine whether any added content was intended to reach a new audience. And if you find any content added to the hyperlink was intended to reach a new audience, it constitutes a republication.
Is the
There
audience
was no
on Twitter?
content added to the article. She tweeted above the article simply saying, today I published this. That's what she said.
my
She didn't
God.
add any content to it. She could have added some of the content that you've heard in this courtroom to it. She could have said,
She
not only
kind of
did 2
did.
years ago I become a public figure representing domestic abuse, but let me tell you about the domestic abuse that I suffered. That would be adding new content. This is not adding new content.
Let's throw out a red herring.
But I guess it's
Good
no
idea.
surprise, because this whole case is about blaming Amber Heard for things she didn't do. But that's what Mr. Depp does.
Mm-hmm.
It's what he's always done. Blame other people, refuse to take accountability.
It's what
The
he's
problem
always
for him
done.
here is that he's running headlong into the United States Constitution, which says that you cannot hold Amber Heard liable for words she didn't write or publish.
Uh-huh.
But here we are.
But that's what you're doing with
Here
Adam
we are.
Waldman.
And you can decide this case without ever
You're doing the
wading
exact
into
same
any
thing.
of the allegations, the facts, the evidence that you've heard about the heinous abuse that Ms. Heard suffered at the hands of Mr. Depp. You can decide that by determining that those statements are true and that they're protected by the First Amendment. But
Let's
Mr.
burn
Depp brought
Amber.
this case, and he's suggesting
What's
that he
that
was
there?
never abusive to Ms. Heard. So if that's where you want to make your decision, that's where the road ends for Mr. Depp. Ladies and gentlemen, let me be very clear.
Johnny Depp hates the
If
Constitution.
Amber was abused by Mr. Depp even one time, then she wins. One time. And we're not just talking about physical abuse. We're talking about emotional abuse, psychological abuse.
This is a good argument for him.
Financial abuse.
This is a good argument for him.
Sexual abuse. That's what we're talking about. Let's look at the evidence. You heard Mr. Depp define abuse from his own mouth. He admitted all of that when he talked about his childhood.
Yep.
As they reference, his mother called him one-eyed because he had a lazy eye. And he said that that was worse than the beatings that he took. Worse than the beatings that he took. Being called one-eyed by his mother was worse than the beatings that he took. And after the evidence that you've seen, some of which you're going to see, I want you to think to yourself, is being called one-eye worse than what he did to Miss Heard? Absolutely not. You'll remember his expert, Shannon Curry, agreed with all that. That abuse can
Contextualize.
take
He's like
many
8 years
forms.
old.
And you'll remember that Don
As a
Hughes, Miss
child,
Heard's
yeah.
expert, talked about the reports of intimate partner violence
What a joke.
by Miss Heard, characterized by
his
physical
own
violence,
mother.
psychological aggression, sexual violence, coercive control, and surveillance behaviors. She tested Miss Heard. She said that the tests show that there's a high degree of serious violence perpetrated by Mr. Depp toward Miss Heard. She got that opinion and that impression by reviewing the medical records of Miss Heard. She talked about the role of coercive control that Mr. Depp exercised over Miss Heard. The effect of coercive control, she said, was drastic, and it was composed of things such as possessive jealousy, the imbalance of power, not only in physical stature
here
and
we
physical
go.
size, but in where they were in their life and
Another
their career.
buzzword.
By intimidation. She said writing obscene messages to your partner can absolutely be intimidating behavior. She said that Mr. Depp, after reviewing the evidence, banging and throwing and hitting things in
Bring
the
his
household,
dead mother
that's
into it.
psychological
Ugh.
aggression. Punching a wall, throwing something, screaming, that is abuse. That's abuse, ladies and gentlemen. She said alcohol can just throw lighter fluid off a flame in a situation of domestic violence. All of these things constitute the domestic violence that Miss Heard suffered at the hands of Mr. Depp. And he's trying to get you, to fool you, to believing that he's carried his burden of proof that never a single time in their relationship was he in any way, physically or non-physically, abusive to Miss Heard. And that's ridiculous.
That's his
That's
strongest
ridiculous.
argument right there. That's his strongest
So let's
argument.
look at some of that evidence. And like I said, you can apply your own common sense. You don't need to check that
is
at
like
the
a-
door when you go into the
They
deliberation
only need
room.
to win one,
I'm gonna
but he
walk
has
you
to
through
win
the
everything.
evidence, some of the evidence that's been presented, including evidence
Yeah.
from Mr. Depp's own mouth. His own words are the words of his witnesses. Keep in mind the burden of proof.
Okay, here we
As
go.
we go through this evidence, I'd ask you to keep this in mind as well. It's not about who's the better spouse. It's not about whether you think Miss Heard may have been abusive to Mr. Depp. It's not. Because remember, if you think that they were both abusive to each other, and that's what their witness Laurel Anderson testified to, then Amber wins. They're
If they're
trying
both
to trick
wrong,
you into
he's
thinking
wrong.
that Amber has to be
Uh-huh.
perfect in order to win. Even while they're ignoring Mr. Depp's many flaws. But don't fall for that trick. Amber's not perfect. None of us are. She's never pretended to be, and that's not what you're being asked to decide.
Yep.
One time, ladies and gentlemen, one time.
Please.
He abused her one time, Amber wins.
30 cents for 10.
Actually, if he fails to prove that he never abused her one time, Amber wins. So let's take a look at some of the evidence. This was one of the first messages shown to Mr. Depp in his cross-examination. This is a message to Paul Bettany, his drug buddy, early on in their relationship, when he says, "Let's burn Amber. Let's drown her before we burn her. I will fuck her burnt corpse afterwards to make sure she is dead." Some of the most vile, disgusting language that you could ever imagine. That is what he said to her at the beginning of the relationship. So let's look at how the relationship
Wait, I
was
thought you
bookended.
just said he said it to his friend.
You remembered Mr. Depp the other day in response to some text that we'll see later saying, "I don't write like that."
Wait, what?
This is a bookend of the relationship. This is after it was over. I asked Mr. Depp to read that top text. You'll remember that was the only thing I asked him to read, and he immediately said, "I didn't write that text," even though, of course he did.
Of course.
Even though he wrote the text under it that said, "Hopefully that cunt's rotting corpse is decomposing in the fucking trunk of a Honda Civic." That's how he bookended their relationship. Ladies and gentlemen,
But he's not even
these
saying that
words
to her.
are a window into the heart and mind of America's favorite pirate. This is the real Johnny Depp.
America's favorite pirate.
This is the real Johnny Depp after Miss Heard decided that she
Oh my God.
couldn't take it anymore. Decided that she needed to leave him.
Yes.
And I'm not going to reread this whole text to you. But this is where he says she's begging for
Holy
global humiliation.
shit.
And she's going to get it. He says, "I'll stop at nothing, and I can only hope that karma kicks in and takes the gift of breath from her."
Uh-huh.
It's one of the only promises to Miss Heard that Mr. Depp has ever kept. That's how he ended the relationship. But you saw how he started it.
Uh-huh.
Now, Miss Heard did testify on the stand that Mr. Depp abused her countless times.
Was this verbal comments?
First it started,
Not even
they
towards her.
were very happy. They started dating in 2011, and things were good. And she testified that even during periods of abuse, even during their relationship, when there was abuse occurring, that there were periods where they were very happy. It's the cycle of violence. It's the cycle of sobriety. There were periods when
right about
everything
that.
was good, when the monster was gone, and then the monster would return.
Is he a monster or
You
a
heard
pirate?
about how the first incidents of violence took place in 2012 when Miss Heard asked Johnny about his tattoo that used to say Winona Forever and had been changed to say Wino Forever. And she laughed. And she said, "And he slapped me across the face." She thought it was a joke, and then he did it 2 more times. And then he said,
Oh, yeah.
"I thought I put the monster away, and I've done it before." That's what he said to her during that first incidence of violence.
Yeah.
But you don't just have to take
I heard
what
that.
Mr. Depp
Oh, wait.
said in his text. We can hear through his own voice
Okay.
what he called Miss Heard.
Here we go.
Because you're a fucking cunt!
We talked about the monster. You heard Mr. Depp get on the stand and say that that was Miss Heard's term. She made it up. That was what she used to refer to him when she was nagging him, because she didn't want him to have a good time. She didn't want him to have a beer once in a while. That's what he's implying. But no, this was a term created by Mr. Depp that she heard for the first time in 2012 after he slapped her 3 times across the face and said, "I thought I put the monster away." And after he sat up here on the stand under oath and told you that she made that term up, we look back at his texts, the writing at the time. The first text is after Australia in 2015, during a period of sobriety, a short-lived period of recovery for Mr. Depp, when he told Jerry Judge, his bodyguard, all I had to do was send the monster away and lock him up. Remember, he texted Elton John, or sent an email to Elton John in 2012, referring to himself as the monster. He tells Dr. Kipper, the doctor to whom he's paid millions and millions and millions of dollars, "Thank you, my darling Kipper." He says, "I've locked my monster child away in a cage deep within."
Okay.
He tells Stephen Duders, you know Mr. Duders, he liked to text Mr. Duders. He tells him, she thinks my Peruvian period, which is a reference to cocaine, he admitted to that means him using cocaine, has made me a monster and that I am ruining the relationship. Imagine that. Someone actually thinking that maybe the impact of alcohol and cocaine is ruining a relationship. How dare she? He says, need to discuss the news helicopters. The monster, I want to shoot a motherfucker, but don't worry, the monster is not involved. Mr. Depp knows that he can turn into a monster. He knows that.
He
He knows that.
I feel that way too.
And tried to deny that to you.
Yeah.
Talk about the lack of accountability.
Hell yeah, I think that.
Let's see the monster. Let's see the monster in the flesh.
Okay, let's see it. Okay, here we go. This is the worst Elden Ring boss transition ever.
What happened?
Motherfucker.
What happened?
He's just ignoring her. He's just fucking ignoring her. He doesn't want to talk to her. Okay.
Nothing happened this morning, you know that?
Were you in here?
No.
So then nothing happened to you this morning.
Yeah, you're right. I just woke up and you were so sweet and nice. We were not even fighting this morning. All I did was say sorry.
Did something happen to you this morning? I don't think so.
Look at her trying to make sure it's in the frame.
No, that's the thing.
You want to see crazy? I'll give you fucking crazy.
She moved it out of the way.
Oh, you're crazy. Oh, you're crazy.
Have you drunk this whole thing this morning?
Oh, you got this going. You got this going?
I just started it.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Really? Sneak that shit on me,
No,
motherfucker.
I didn't. You were smashing shit.
Bye.
And then he
See,
beat
that's
the
her
shit out
laughing
of
at
her
that.
as soon as she turned it
She's not
off.
laughing in that. Mr.
Yeah.
Depp in this courtroom right now
As
is
soon as
laughing
she
and
turned
making
it off,
snide
he beat
remarks
the
at
shit
that
out of
video
her.
that's being played. But it's not a laughing matter. Who does that? Who does that? Imagine being in Amber's shoes on February 10th, 2016, videotaping him because when he's sober and sweet, you've never loved anything more. But when he mixes the drugs and he mixes drinks, he turns into this man. You've seen it before. You're praying it won't happen again, but deep down, you know it will. You know that that man will come out. You know that monster will come out, and you want him to change. Imagine watching your husband, the person you love, behaving violently that way, like a wild animal. That is abuse. That's abuse. And you don't have to look at that incident in isolation to find that it's abuse. You can look at it in the context of their whole relationship. This isn't about breaking down a series of individual days that you've heard evidence about. This is about the cumulative effect of Mr. Depp and Ms. Heard's relationship and whether that constitutes abuse. That is abuse, ladies and gentlemen. That's domestic abuse.
It's
And
the
their response is,
It's not the cabinet on
She sold
trial.
it to TMZ, which she didn't. There's no evidence of. And she was on a plane. The only evidence suggests she was on an international flight when Mr. Tremaine testified that they received it and it was validated within something like 15 minutes, which could only have happened by the person who sent it. Ms. Heard was in the air. She didn't send it to TMZ. She never leaked anything to TMZ.
What a-
You heard from her own mouth.
Come on,
Who
bro.
would want that to become public?
You know you can buy Wi-Fi in a plane. That doesn't mean that it was necessarily her. It could have been a publicist
Again,
too.
in order to find for
Oh
Mr.
my
Depp,
God.
you would have to find that for his defamation claim, every single thing that ever happened between them that could constitute abuse Amber was the abuser. Every single time. You have to believe the unbelievable. You all are smarter than that.
Ah.
But Mr. Depp thought he could hide it. He thought he could hide the monster. That's why he lied in insurance forms that you have to fill out in order to be able to act. That's why he said he hadn't taken illegal substances, whether prescribed by a physician or not. That obviously wasn't true within the past 12 months.
Okay.
They keep talking about Mr. Depp's role as a father. This is what he sent, a text that he sent DX207. Now Lily Rose, his daughter, hates me because she thinks I'm drinking, and she's right, but I can't admit, or I fucking die in her eyes. Thanks for that one, Vanessa.
Okay. Oh my God.
This is Mr. Depp passed out in a Tokyo hotel room during the press tour for The Lone Ranger in 2013. When Ms. Heard testified that Mr. Depp screamed at me, and all I could think were the kids are in an adjoining room. And Mr. Depp passed out with his head like this. I think
Yeah.
he was sleeping on the floor because he had a bad back. They keep referring to these pictures as she took pictures of Mr. Depp while he was asleep.
She did.
He's not asleep in that picture. He's passed out, drunk, and high, and she's taking pictures because she wants him to realize what he's done and get help and seek help. I don't think that looks like the spice cabinet of anyone in this courtroom. That's Mr. Depp. This is Mr. Depp.
He smokes
Mr. Depp.
weed?
This is Mr. Depp.
Hold up.
And all you hear from Mr. Depp
What?
when these pictures are shown is snickering and defiance. Victim blaming. Blaming Miss Heard for taking this picture of him, for trying to help. So let's talk about some of these instances of abuse. Oh, forgot one. In March 2013,
Okay.
talked about the Wino Forever tattoo. In March 2013, there were a couple instances. There was one where on March 8th, and we'll get to that in a second, where he was drinking brown liquor and doing a lot of cocaine. Or that might have been that was March 22nd. On March 8th, this is when Mr. Depp backhanded her. She felt like her lip went into her teeth and got a little blood on the wall.
Uh-huh.
He grabbed her by the arm and held her on the floor, screaming at her.
No blood.
We'll come back to this in a minute. This is March 22nd. This is what Mr. Depp said isn't every hour happy hour. Again, totally abandoning any responsibility for behavior like this. But what happened on March 22nd is he wanted Miss Heard to remove a painting by her ex-partner. And he wanted to admit to an affair that she wasn't having. She didn't admit to it because it wasn't true. So he decided to have some lines of cocaine and some whiskey for breakfast.
Okay.
And then, on the way to filming the Keith Richards documentary, after a multi-hour argument, he grabbed
Who's trying to get in character?
their dog, their teacup Yorkie, and holds the dog, Boo, out of the window of a moving car. And he's howling like an animal, Miss Heard said, while holding the dog out of the car. That is abuse, ladies and gentlemen. That's abuse.
What is this, man?
Let's go back to this, because Ms. Vasquez read a parade of witnesses that she believes support Johnny's defense in this case. But as you've seen over the course of this proceeding, these witnesses, as I previewed in the opening, almost all of them are witnesses on his payroll. They're all scared to say anything bad about him.
Almost.
They've seen what happens to people who do. And none were there for the instances of domestic violence. What they're saying is, oh, if he didn't abuse Miss Heard in front of his 4 bodyguards, then it must have never happened. That's essentially what they're asking you to believe. That's ridiculous. That's not the way domestic violence works. Take his sister, Christy. I know it seems like a year ago, but she was the first witness in this case. You'll remember her on the stand when I presented her with these texts that say, stop drinking, stop coke, and stop pills. You'll remember her squirming and saying, I don't think I was asking him to stop drinking, stop coke, stop pills. She couldn't even answer that basic question because she wanted to lie for Mr. Depp and say that Miss Heard was delusional.
So let's say his sister lied for him.
She's nothing
Same
but
to
an
you.
enabler. The same with Sean Bett, his head of security. who's been sitting in this courtroom for the past 6 weeks. He's right there. Mr. Bett was the one who testified to you that when Mr. Depp has a few drinks of alcohol, he said, I wrote this down, he said it's like the rest of us drinking sparkling water. I don't think that kitchen video that we just saw was like you or I when we drink sparkling water. This is the same Sean Bett who said that on the evening of May 21st, 2016, which Elaine will talk about in a little bit, he said Mr. Depp may have bumped something off a table. You've seen the pictures. You'll see him again. Just like Travis McGivern said that Mr. Depp rearranged Miss Heard's closet. You've seen the pictures.
Is he
You'll see him
on
again.
trial for being a drug addict?
Just like Tara Roberts in the Bahamas, who tried to blame everything on Miss Heard and only under cross-examination admitted that Mr. Depp passed out face down in the sand underneath a hammock and his son Jack found him there. She took a video of their cabin in the Bahamas to try to suggest to you that this assault that Miss Heard alleges couldn't have taken place. But conveniently, she didn't take the camera into the closet where Mr. Depp held Miss Heard, hit her. We'll get to that incident. She didn't take the video camera into the bathroom where he sexually assaulted Miss Heard. She didn't do that.
Neither did she.
Because she wanted to generate evidence only favorable to Mr. Depp. Think about Sean Bett and Starling Jenkins' conflicting stories about the birthday party on April 21st. Remember, Mr. Depp experienced horrific financial news the evening of that night, April 21st, 2016. He learned that he was essentially out of money and he needed to start selling things. Well, we all know what Mr. Depp does when he receives bad news like that.
We
He
all
left
know.
the meeting at 9:30 and didn't arrive at Miss Heard's birthday party until 11:15. Okay, fine, he was late. But we all know what he does when he has that hour and 45 minutes of free time and he's stressed out about something.
We all know.
Mr. Bett testified, remember he said, I took him to his home on Sweetser Avenue, his other home, to pick up a birthday present for Miss Heard. That's what he said.
Okay.
That's what he said. Mr. Jenkins, you may remember him. He testified about the video link on the stand. And I said, you don't know what he did in that intervening time period. And he said, oh, yes, I do. I do.
Oh, he does.
He said, Mr. Depp was visiting his sick mother. And I said, who told you that? And he said, Mr. Bett. The witnesses that Mr. Depp has paraded up here, who are here in person, they're here in person because they're on his payroll. Almost all of them.
Except the
And they're
most compelling
telling
ones.
you whatever they think they need to tell you to get you to take Mr. Depp's side. Just as we previewed they would do in the opening.
Of course.
But Mr. Depp
It's
would
all
go
a
through periods where he would
conspiracy.
apologize, where he would be grateful. I have no doubt that there were times when Mr. Depp wanted to get better. These are texts, PX 120A and 120B. I won't read them all to you. These are texts that Mr. Depp sent to Paige
on
Heard,
Johnny's payroll, too.
Amber's mom, after detox on the island in 2014. He says, there were more than a few times when I thought it would be more simple to take that route. Meaning go for a swim and swallow a big drink of ocean. And he said it was Amber and Amber alone that got me through this.
Okay.
There is no luckier man on this earth to have the strength that Amber gives me and the full support of each of you. So as you're weighing the evidence and you're weighing Mr. Depp's credibility, think to yourself, what do I believe? What he has a motive to say on the stand, or what he wrote contemporaneously with the events? Take his own words to Amber after the detox. Just to let you know that I'm fine, my angel. I miss you, of course, but this was the right thing to do to speed up the process. I love you more than life.
Okay.
But then there were these days. Then there were times like this. This is sent on March 9th.
Not a big deal.
We had a slightly grim morning, is the way Mr. Depp describes it.
Yeah?
You'll remember the text from a few days later, referred to as the disco bloodbath text, where Miss Heard says, is that about last Friday night by any chance? And Mr. Depp responds, how can you make me smile about such a hideous moment? He testified on the stand, I don't remember what happened that Friday night, but Miss Heard sure did. And this is one of the things that she had to show for it. Now, Ms. Vasquez showed this to you in opening statements and made it seem like, again, remember what I said at the beginning, if you take pictures They're fake. If you didn't take pictures, it didn't happen. Here's one where she did take a picture, but Ms. Vasquez says, but she doesn't have injuries on her face.
Yeah.
Look at the date that this picture was taken,
That's
ladies
true.
and gentlemen. March 23rd, 2013. 15 days after this incident.
But there's still a bruise.
So even when there are pictures, they're trying to deceive you into thinking, oh, there should have been more.
So
This
she
is
took a
2-week-old
picture
bruise.
15 days later?
And she texted, look who she
What?
texted that to. She texted to her mom. They say she never
Oh,
told
bringing
anyone.
up 2 dead moms. That's good.
Text to mom, March 23rd,
Wow.
2013. Let's go to Hicksville. You remember Hicksville, obviously. There's been a little bit of discussion about that in this case. This is where Mr. Depp got jealous that a woman named Kelly Sue was sitting close to Miss Heard and maybe had her arm around her at a campfire. And everyone was having a good time. There were some mushrooms involved. There was some drinking. And Mr. Depp got jealous of that. Now, he claims that Miss Heard is the abuser, that she's so much stronger than he is. But then he testified that the evidence shows that in Hicksville, he was the one who said he was just trying to protect Amber. Well, who says, why would she need protection if she's the abuser? And he went and he took Kelly Sue's hand, forcibly removed it from Miss Heard, embarrassing Miss Heard, ruining the mood of the whole night. So they went and they got into an argument in the trailer, in which not only did he trash the trailer, but he took her into the bathroom.
Here
He
we go.
slammed her up against the side wall of the bedroom, by her neck, holds her there, and no, sorry, that was the next one. In Hicksville, he took her into the bathroom of the trailer.
Wrong page
He did
of the
what
script.
He called a cavity search, where he inserted his fingers inside of her and sexually assaulted her, then trashed the trailer.
Ah.
And you heard this Morgan Knight person who testified a few days ago,
This
who
Morgan
said it
Knight
was
person.
$62 of damage. You also heard evidence that the way he got involved in this trial was by reaching out to one of the main Johnny Depp fan influencers on social media. And you saw that text. That's how he injected himself into this trial.
That's not
There was
true.
way more than $62 of damage. You heard testimony from Rocky Pennington,
That
Whitney
didn't
Heard,
happen.
Whitney Enriquez, and Amber about him trashing the trailer.
How
And
can
is
you
that
just
really a
lie like
surprise?
that?
The man's admitted that he smashes things when he gets angry. The
He
man's
said he didn't
admitted
reach
that
out.
he smashed
No.
hotel rooms. You saw the quote that he admitted to the other day, that when he wants to hit something, he's going to hit it, and he doesn't care about the repercussions.
From 1995.
So in Hicksville, the Hicksville was late May 2013. This is a text, another text to drug buddy Bettany, where he says, I, of course, pounded and displayed ugly colors to Amber on recent journey. I am an insane person and not so fair-headed after too much of the drink. Weed, pills, fine. Booze, my capacity is too large and I won't stop. Ugly and sad. Oh, how I love it.
It's impressive. He's not even stopping.
There appears to be an Amber Alert, but I think we're okay. People are getting it, I guess, on their phones that haven't silenced that.
Okay, Your Honor.
Okay.
Can I keep going?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Keep telling the story. Weave us a tale.
That's after Hicksville. This is what I was getting to next. Remember the testimony about Mr. Depp being drunk on his yacht on the island in the Bahamas in 2013,
Stream snipers.
when Mr. Depp looked a little scary by the way his
It's
body
Amber
fell in the
Alert.
water.
Oh my
And
God.
Lily Rose, his daughter,
Oh
started
my
to cry.
God, bro.
Miss Heard comforted Lily Rose, and then Depp accused Amber of making them aware of this, that he was
Sure,
drinking
Lord.
again, making his kids aware of this. And he slammed her up against the sidewall of the bed,
Oh my God.
held her
Yeah.
up by her neck, held her there for a second, and said, I can fucking kill you, and you're an embarrassment.
Damn.
That's what he said.
How could he
and
do
then,
such a
do you
thing?
remember what happened? Lily Rose and Amber helicoptered away from the island. And while Amber was in the helicopter with Lily Rose, Mr. Depp sends her this piece of
Amber
poetry,
Alert during our closing.
calling her a lesbian camp counselor because she cared about his drinking, and just ridiculing her
Uh-huh.
for trying to protect his daughter.
Yeah, there it is.
Sickening. This text, let's fast forward a little bit to
Officer
actually, before we talk
Squarehead?
about this is
Yeah.
the Boston flight. Let's talk about the Moscow flight. The Moscow flight, when Mr. Depp and Amber, she said that was the one time she took ecstasy or MDMA with Mr. Depp.
The
She
one
learned her
time.
lesson.
It's only
when
once.
he hit her on the plane, when he threatened to break the flight attendant's wrist, and Miss Vasquez, again, just tried to tell you, oh, he always wore rings. Now, Miss Heard said almost all the time he did, or maybe sometimes when he didn't. And in the picture that she just showed you, PX 1248, you can take a look at that when you review the evidence. That's a picture taken in Moscow with no rings other than a wedding ring on his finger.
He only puts,
Or
he
some
only
kind
takes
of
his,
ring.
he
It's
takes his
one ring
rings
on his
off whenever he hits her.
And so,
Yeah.
in Mr. Depp's world, they're going to try to come at you either way. They say, well, he was wearing rings, but it didn't leave a mark on your face. And then they show you a picture where he wasn't wearing rings during that trip. So that's what happened in Moscow. On 2013, in London, Mr. Depp.
Is this me or them? I'll refresh.
On 2013, in London, Mr. Depp.
The fuck? Is it on them? It's them? Okay. Give me a second. I'll open up another one. Bro, like, this shit's so laggy, I don't know what this is. This is nuts. I might just pause this, open up the other one.
Mentioned in this case by Mr. Depp about Miss Heard not wanting him to leave. Miss Heard not wanting him to leave. Well, this is why she didn't want him to leave, because he goes off with his friends and he twists off, as he calls it, and goes on a multi-day bender. That's why she didn't want him to leave when he got spun up like that. And she could see the monster coming. So let's fast forward to the Boston plane incident.
Sorry, we're good now.
Mr. Depp was jealous that she was filming a movie with James Franco. Miss Heard testified that when she met him in Boston, she was on the plane, his car pulled up. She could guess by the way he was moving. She knew what was going to board that plane, and it wasn't Mr. Depp, the man. It was Mr. Depp, the monster. She said, I already know he's drunk. I already know he's using. And then when he got on the plane, he straight up started taunting her. He called her a go-getter and a slut. He started throwing things at her, ice cubes and utensils, and he slapped her face against the window. She was seated. And when she got up to move, how dare she? He kicked her in the back. She said, I feel this boot in my back. And he continued to drink and eventually started howling like an animal, passed out.
Again. That's the real
Play
monster.
221, please.
The werewolf. Evidence? No, that's it. Johnny makes the evidence on it. Or not her. Okay. It sounds like somebody who's drunk and high on an airplane.
He expects you to believe him that he didn't have anything to drink on that plane except for maybe one thing of champagne. That's what he expects you to believe. He's talked about blackouts. These blackouts where he doesn't remember what happened. He blamed them only on opiates, but we know they happened throughout, where he doesn't remember what happened. As you're weighing the evidence, as you're assessing whether Mr. Depp has borne his burden of proof, think to yourself, do you believe Amber's account of what happened on the plane, or do you believe that person's account that you just heard? But actually, you can look at his account from a few days later, May 30th, in which he told, again, Paul Bettany, he said, drank all night before I picked Amber up to fly to LA.
Yeah.
No food for days, powders, half a bottle of whiskey, 1,000 Red Bulls and vodkas, pills, 2 bottles of champagne, and what do you get? An angry aggro engine in a fucking blackout, screaming obscenities and insulting any fuck who got near. I'm done. I'm admittedly too fucked in the head to spray my rage at the one I love. For little reason as well, I'm too old to be that guy, but pills are fine.
Yeah, I mean, you can't throw everything out.
He expects you to believe that he's carried his burden of proof in showing that no abuse happened on that plane. You don't have to look at just that. You can
Other
look at
one's
this
working?
text to
Okay.
Patty Smith when he says, when I was in NYC, they were brief visits, and I fucked and charged by horrific fights with Amber. I fucked up and drank and got shitty, was so disappointed in myself. You can look at his text to Miss Heard the next day. Shame and regret. Of course, I'm sorry. I really don't know why or what happened. Well, no wonder. You heard the voice on the plane. Of course he doesn't know what happened. But I will never do
come
it
on.
again. My illness somehow crept up and grabbed me. I must get better. I love you and feel so bad for letting you down. And what his response has been throughout this trial to things like that is blaming Amber, saying he's just placating her.
Dude, I'm trying to make it as good as
That
possible.
carrying his
I had to
burden of
swap
proof
it
and
again.
showing that abuse hasn't happened even a single time. This is in the lead up to Australia. But before we get there, we can talk about January 25th in Tokyo at the premiere of Mordecai.
I mean, he said
where he
insulting
did
and screaming.
slam her up against the hallway wall, wailed on her. And he did get on her back in the closet. And what do they say? Look at her backless dress. She doesn't have any bruises. She testified
Yeah,
herself that she
true.
was checking out pictures because she was concerned that there were. So now their theory is if there's no marks, it didn't happen. We all know that's not the case.
Yep.
February 2015, this is when they got married. The day they got married, you heard the testimony from Io Tillett Wright that where Mr. Depp told him, I can now punch her anytime I want and no one can do anything about it.
Okay.
He'll
I
say
mean-
it's a joke he made on his wedding day. Then we
Yeah.
fast forward to Australia, where
That's
Miss
about
Heard
right.
is flying
Yep.
from London, where she's filming The Danish Girl, to see her new husband for the first time since their wedding.
It's a bad
and
joke.
These are excerpts from DX353. All but the bottom right one are in the days leading up to this, where he's on a drug-fueled bender. He's hanging out with Marilyn Manson. He's getting drugs from his assistants, who are enablers. Again, there's a reason you didn't hear them testify in this trial.
Why?
They're
Couldn't
getting him
you have
drugs
called
for
on him to
days and
testify?
days. And then the one on the bottom right, you'll remember you've seen a couple times. This is after he chopped his finger off, when he says, need more cocaine and ecstasy.
Uh-huh. That's
So,
frozen.
and
It'll
no
fix
one,
itself.
Miss Heard's was in touch with his assistants, but no one told her the hornet's nest that she was walking into. And we all know what happened in Australia. We all know that Mr. Depp, she gets there, he pulls out a bag of MDMA, and he took a handful. She didn't say he took 10 at a time. She did say he took 8 to 10
How many
over
fit
the
in your
course
hand?
of that period. The second day, Mr. Depp, who claims that
To
Miss
try it
Heard refused to do a post-nup, calls Amber's domestic relations attorney, Michelle Mulrooney, you heard from her, when he was drunk, and he fired her. And he told Amber for about the 25th time, she said, the only way out of this is death. I don't want a post-nup. And then she said that she remembered him slamming up against the wall. And I won't go through, you remember her testimony from Australia. You remember her saying that he had her by the neck, squeezing her neck. You remember her saying that he threw her on the games table like a ping pong table. You remember seeing the pictures of that broken table. You remember her saying that at some point he had a broken bottle up against her face, and he told her that he'd carve up her face, that he was throwing bottles at her. He's throwing bottles one after another, and I could feel glass breaking behind me, and you've seen the evidence of that. And he was just over and over again smashing the phone into the wall, screaming at me as she watched it break into pieces. Now, she doesn't know how he lost his finger. She said that she saw him smash a phone to pieces, and you heard him get impeached the other day with his testimony from the UK, which was different from what he testified here, where he said he did smash a phone. And then they tried to put that picture in front of you with a desk phone and suggest that that was it. It's deception.
Okay.
They're trying to deceive you. And then you heard Ms. Heard testify that the next morning she found meat that he had left all over the house. But not before what happened before she went to bed that night. Where Ms. Heard testified, and I remember trying to get up, and I was slipping on the glass. I was wanting to move. I felt this pressure in my pubic bone. I remember just not wanting to move because I didn't know if it was broken. I didn't know if the bottle that he had inside me was broken.
Tell her story in the most dramatic way possible and hope they believe it. That's very cute.
This is the next morning.
Wow.
This is what he wrote with the bloody stump of his finger. And there's been
The
testimony
bloody
about
stump of
what
his
happened
finger.
To cut the finger off. But frankly, it's irrelevant to your deliberations.
Elden
here.
Lord.
Amber could have chopped it off with an axe, and it has nothing to do with whether or not Mr. Depp abused her. But we all know she didn't. We all know that his fingers weren't curled, and someone was standing with a half-gallon vodka bottle.
I think that kind of
about where
matters.
that canopy is, and threw it, and it somehow
What? Yeah.
managed to damage just
Fuck
the
that.
bottom of the finger and leave the nail fully intact. We all know that didn't happen. Mr. Depp knows it didn't happen. We'll see some evidence. of
The
that.
expert doesn't.
But here, he writes about her ambitions, starring Billy Bob and Easy Amber, who talked about controlling jealousy, talked about him not wanting her to act. Dawn Hughes testified how that is a form of intimate partner abuse. Here he's writing on the mirror again.
The mirror
and they try
sheet.
to blame her and say that she wrote Call Carly Simon. She didn't write that. Who was the lunatic in the house? Who was writing everywhere? There's no evidence she wrote that. She testified she doesn't even know who Carly Simon was until she was told. This is some of the evidence. Mr. Depp
Okay.
told you a couple different stories the other day about the evidence on the right. He claimed that was the handle of vodka between those two beer cans there. But then under cross-examination, he admitted it's not, that there's not enough glass on the floor, that there's no handle of vodka on the floor. But what there is in the picture on the right is evidence of when he was throwing bottles past Amber's head and breaking that plate glass window. More writing, more abuse on the right. Imagining having a painting area where you're drawing two canvases and you and your husband get in a fight, and while you are asleep that night, he takes the bloody stump of his finger and dips it in paint and destroys your paintings. Ladies and gentlemen, that's abuse. Good luck and be careful at the top. And this is a good chance to talk about Mr. Depp's controlling and jealous rage and his desire to control Amber's career.
What?
He didn't want her to act. As early as 2013,
This is
he tells his
outrageous.
sister, I don't need actress bullshit and her fucking ambition. He tells her in this recording,
This is outrageous. What is this?
If you look at the bigger picture, what is
became irrational when you're doing movies. I become jealous and fucking crazy and weird. And, you know, you fight a lot more.
I become jealous when you're doing movies. I become irrational and fucking crazy and weird. Out of his own mouth. This is some of the notes of Dr. Blaustein, his therapist. Called him self-destructive. Something about wait up to fight the devil.
This is the vibe
Jealous. And I know this is hard to read, but you can see jealous. You can see paranoia, fear, envy. He wanted to control her. He wanted to own her. He
This is
didn't
the
want her
vibe
to
I
have
get.
any career. And then he says things
fucking
like,
ridiculous.
I have other uses for your throat, which do not include injury.
get.
No one hasn't previously grabbed someone by the throat would write, which do not include injury. But we all know how Mr. Depp thinks along these lines, because you saw these two texts the other day that he sat on the stand and denied writing. And I'm not going to read them to you again, because they're the most vulgar, vile writing you can imagine.
Yep.
He said, that's not my style. I wouldn't write like that. Of course he would. And he did. These are texts
Of
that
course he
produced,
would.
that he gave to
Of
Amber
course.
and our team in this litigation, from him to his personal assistant, Stephen Duders. This is the way he thinks about women.
Oh,
This,
now it's
not what you
now it's
heard on
about
the
all
stand,
women.
That. It's disgusting.